was scared of being seen. Like
Mm,
that, your point. This is like the dilemma of a
mm,
person in mental health crisis. I was dying to be seen and terrified. So I did a lot of push pull
right.
in everywhere I went in my life, like see me, see me. And then it's like you turn around, Christie's gone. Like I would
Mm.
just vaporize from situations.
This is UNSILENT, a speak series from NoStigmas that champions mental health advocacy and challenges the stigmas that prevent people from getting the help they need. I'm Eli Lawson, a producer for the show. Last week, in part one of this two-part finale, we heard about New York Times bestselling author Christie Tate's family upbringing and how a lack of openness, among other factors, contributed to her bulimia and negative body image. This week, in part two, we're going to pick up Lance's conversation with Christie right where it left off. We'll hear about Christie's initial hesitation to join a group therapy session, but we'll see how that one group radically changed her life. If you want to learn more or contact us, visit nostigmas.org. Don't face it alone. Be unsilent. This week's episode contains mentions of bulimia and suicidal idealization. While there's nothing explicit, it could be triggering for some. It's okay if you need to skip this one. Do what's right for you.
What is group like? Like, what is a group experience? I mean, did you have any kind of anxiety or skepticism up front, or were there anything that you were kind of nervous about going into a group therapy?
Yeah, I was terrified. Yes, 100%. I was terrified. Who's going to be there? I didn't know, were they going to be like scary criminals?
Mm,
Or I was scared of that, but I was also like, what if they're super boring and their problems are like, oh, I wish I had more money. Like not because they were poor, but just because they were like wanted more money. Like what if they were like didn't share my values and didn't know crisis? I was really scared. I didn't until I went to group. I did not have the imagination to visualize, oh, I would connect with these people. Even though I'd been in 12-step program for almost 7 years by then, I couldn't picture who goes to group, pays this money to this wild man, and who's this going to be? And he told, my first group was a professionals group. And I was like, I don't even know what that means, professionals. It was anybody who needed a license to practice their profession. And I was a law student, so that qualified me because my job was going to be a lawyer. So I get in there, and it's like lawyers, dentists, and doctors. And I'm like, what? Like they just looked like straight-laced people who had like never known pain, and they had little briefcases. And I was really scared that I was scared of being seen. Like
mm,
that, your point. This is like the dilemma of a
mm,
person in mental health crisis. I was dying to be seen and terrified. So I did a lot of push pull
right.
in everywhere I went in my life, like see me, see me. And then it's like you turn around, Christie's gone. Like I would
Mm,
just vaporize from situations. So people, like, it was scary, but I also was like hungry for that.
yeah.
And I
Mm,
really like people and I'm pretty extroverted. It doesn't mean an introverted person can't do group, but I think I was able to adapt quicker because I really did. I did want to hear, I was curious about these lives and why are you here? And
mhm.
there was another guy, a psychiatrist started the same day that I did. So I kind of felt like I had a little buddy. I was like a new kid and there was someone else there. And one thing that struck me from the very beginning about group was there's nowhere to hide. There's all these eyes. There's these people.
I
Just
never
like
thought about that. I never
it's
thought about that.
yeah, it's like they could see my body. Like when I crossed my legs, we were all talking and something got uncomfortable and I crossed my legs, a gesture that I didn't pay any attention to, and everyone was staring at me. I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "You just crossed your legs." I'm like, "So what?" And they're like, "That means you're feeling shame." Like it's like people are reading me. They're reading my body and I
Whoa,
was
I
being
never
seen.
would have thought about that. That's so true.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, terrible thing to be in a fishbowl, and I have a lot of ambivalence about it even today, but on the whole, I think I'm better for tolerating my witnesses and letting myself be seen in all my mess. That
Mm.
is a gift. I haven't been abandoned yet, and I've been there 20 plus years. I have not been abandoned no matter how ugly and how stinky I feel or I am when I will put my junk out into the group, you know?
If you or someone you know is experiencing a crisis, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org for support via live chat. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, please call 911. Other resources are linked in the show notes.
So what is the experience in a group therapy is, we all see representations of group therapy
Yeah.
in the media. So, but is when you're in that space and once you kind of get past the nerves and the getting to know the group and who they are, and is there really an interaction between all of the people in the room, or does it tend to happen between you and maybe the facilitator and then a couple of interjections, or
Oh,
like what's the communication style like? Like how does that work?
yeah, it actually varies widely within the group in my experience. There are some sessions where I spend a lot of time talking to Dr. Rosen.
Mm,
I mean, not a ton, but we may go back and forth in a conversation and then everybody's sitting quietly. That tends to be rarer, but it happens. I would say that happens like twice a year. Okay. Otherwise, it's people pinging off each other in the moment. So
yeah.
it's not like I come in and say, "Oh, I had this memory about my mom." It's more like, "Hey, Patrice, when you cut me off 5 minutes ago, I felt super angry." And then Patrice has a reaction to that, which is either it could be anything, right? And so
Hmm.
now you're doing it in the moment. Now Patrice is like my stand-in for my idea of my mom, but we're doing it right here in the here and now. And then other people chime in and they take her side or they take my side or they point things out. And my thing in group is I tend to be very defensive. I'm a very defensive. I come to the world very full of fear and shame. And so my first reactions are going to be, oh, I feel ashamed, so I'm going to be defensive. Like
Mm,
that's just a classic Christie MO, and I'm still unraveling that all these years later. And now there's a little space between getting feedback from someone and saying, okay, I'm curious about myself instead of,
hmm.
oh, I'm a piece of shit. I
Wow.
think the best tool that group has given me is curiosity about myself and others as opposed to pathologizing or criticizing or feeling criticized. Like, let's just look at this. Let's slow down and
Mm,
look at what everybody's feeling and what it brings up. And how could I do this differently? Because if I can do it differently in group, I can do it differently in my marriage and with my children and at work. And it's really transformative.
wow. That did you see my jaw? It started to drop. Like I physically was like, "What?" My mind just yeah, but I never thought about that. I never ever thought about that because all of the talk therapy that I've experienced are, you sometimes wanting it, sometimes just really not. Um, it does feel like you are just recounting
Yes.
experiences, and then there's been so many sessions I remember, like even recently leaving, like I don't think I got anything out of that. I don't
Yeah.
think but I'm a very like deliverables oriented person. Like I need the plan, I need the steps, I need you to tell me, like, what do I do in this situation? So I think putting myself in that situation would be so good for me because I would be actually experiencing the way you're describing it, like experiencing the reactions. That resonates
Yep.
with me on so many levels. So many levels. But what I was saying was what do we do with our friends and family? Because I believe, and I'm sure you believe, if we can just stop being overwhelmed by changing the world, let's just impact our micro community. Let's
Yep.
just impact our family and friends and school, classmates, colleagues. What do we do with this? Like, what do we do? What are actionable steps that we can take to be advocates?
I think the first thing, my instinct is I need to do my own work. And I think before I can pass anything on to anybody else, children or adults, I need to be looking at my own shit. And there's plenty there. And when and the other phrase that came to my mind, which means could mean different things for different people, but what I have noticed with my kids, like sometimes I'll feel this like pull to like be up my daughter's ass about her friendships or I'm like, what's going on there? Inevitably, I need to be looking at my own friendships and I'm projecting onto her
Hmm.
troubled waters or whatever. And really doing my own work is I mean, that is, I think that would save the world. Like, for those of us who can see more clear eye, I don't know, I don't purport to be fully clear-eyed, but I
Depends on
am.
the day of the week. It depends on
Yeah,
the hour of
exactly.
the day.
Exactly. But I do feel very clear that children, we need to get our hands and comments off children's bodies, boys and girls. And I feel really clear about that. And I hope that I've empowered my children both to let people know that they are in charge of their own bodies. I'm not even talking about unwanted touchings or hugs or whatever, but
Hmm.
like, you don't comment about my body. And I as their parents, if I hear talk about that, I stand up for them. There's this concept I've sort of like in my head. I call it I do my recovery out loud. It's
Mm.
not going to help my kids if I very secretly sort of like, oh, I sure wish so and so wouldn't say that about my kid's body. Like, they deserve to be advocated for out loud in
Hmm.
public. This is just like, we don't do that. I wouldn't let them slur my children or anybody else's
Hmm.
children. I
Hmm.
think, how about these
Hmm.
children here who are silently suffering? And those of us, I consider it a duty. I
Mm.
can see the suffering and I need to speak up. I need to have boundaries and create boundaries until they're old enough to have and behold and hold up their own boundaries. Like, we have to help them, because you're exactly right. Otherwise, how are we doing anything different?
Right.
We're
And that's
not.
right. And that goes into, like, like you mentioned, not having the skills set to deal with certain things. And I think in, my own family, that is so true. Not having the skill set as a kid because it wasn't talked about, or it wasn't,
Right.
you never addressed it. Or, I mean, that's why I said before, like when you first told me about your childhood, I was like, man, I'm not smiling because it's like, wow, that was amazing. But I'm smiling because it's uncannily similar to
Yeah.
what I've gone through. And I know, but even my cousins and my sister, like just growing up in a certain type of mentality and like a cone of silence about
Yeah.
things.
Right.
It's debilitating.
It is debilitating, and it's very toxic in many situations. And for a while I felt like, oh, like guilty, like, oh, I can't talk about that. It makes everybody look so bad.
Mm,
What I really have come to peace with is that I understand that my parents were wanted, like, don't talk about that. Don't tell people that. That's a statement that's like fear. They were worried I was going to get branded as a psycho,
mm,
or our family. And it felt like there was so much social stigma and
mhm.
there's like a social minefield. Like, we were trying to look good for the neighbors and for the church. And
Yep.
if we let our mess out, and it's like,
Mm,
whole, like you said, speaking of generations, like, the generations above us, everyone didn't have a therapist, and they didn't use shame on a daily basis as a word in every sentence. They weren't on the lookout for the toxic messages that have just been absorbed.
right.
And the message that my parents had was, if people knew the truth, we would all be ostracized,
Mm,
and that's no way to live.
right. Keep it in. Swallow
Keep it
it.
in. Yeah. I did an event in November 2020, and there was a physician there. She's a psychiatrist, and her name is Dr. Nina Vassen. And she said to us, the audience, and to me, that there were three main reasons why people do not seek mental health treatment. And when they finally do, on average, it's 6 years after the onset of the problem, when they could have first sought help. And we were like, what are the three reasons? She said it's stigma, stigma, and stigma.
Yep.
That's why people do not. So your work here is tremendously important in transforming. You're giving people story, and maybe I'll listen to this with my kids or the people that I love, that I see hurting, who are younger or older. This is
Yeah.
the work of transformation. So thank you for the platform.
This is UNSILENT. Thank you for listening. This two-part finale was hosted by Lance Bordelone and produced by me, Eli Lawson, Lance, John Panicucci, and the rest of the incredible NoStigmas marketing team. Special thanks to Christie for taking the time to share her story with us. And as we wrap up, thank you for being here. We hope that this first season was as impactful for you as it was for us. Everyday advocates like you and me play such an important role in helping everyone get the care that they need. By speaking out, You are demonstrating invaluable courage, and by listening, you're helping us all in our mission to fight the stigmas that surround mental illness. So again, thank you. To go beyond the show, connect with us on social media or visit NoStigmas.org to learn more about mental health topics. If this first season of UNSILENT has helped you out in any way, please consider leaving us a 5-star review and share the show with others who might need it. We'd really appreciate it. We'd also love to hear from you. We're always looking for new topic ideas, guests, and general feedback. You can do that through our website, email, or social media. Finally, remember that whatever you're going through, you don't have to do it alone. Be unsilent. That's it for season 1, but we'll see you soon.